I want to give you a reminder from the previous video of how we were viewing the four signatures. This is a view before we sewed them together, looking at the front page on top and the back page would be on the bottom. This is important to get this perspective before we begin gluing these to the spine and the boards. Here we are viewing the four signatures sewn together, looking at it from the top, that is, viewed from the front page. In video 1, we put together the spine of the book. This is what it looks like. We'll begin gluing up the spine first. We'll use our glue brush and our glue. It can be any kind of bookbinding glue. In this case, it's the acrylic matte medium. And we'll put it on from the top pencil mark to the bottom pencil mark. And we'll go from the edge of the paper almost to the board at the spine. When we put the glue on, we don't want to soak the paper, otherwise it'll stain through. When gluing up your paper and your boards, make sure that you have a plentiful supply of scrap paper in the background. Every time you get glue on that scrap paper in the background, whether it's newspaper or newsprint, then take it away and have a fresh new one so that no glue contaminates the next thing you're gluing up. Now, take your book, the four signatures sewn together with the front page facing you, and press it down with the back page facing down on the paper spine. Press for a minute or so you can feel that the back page is adhering to the paper spine. Now, glue the front part of the paper spine exactly the same way as you did the back one. Turn that over and press it firmly down onto the front page. Keep pressure on it for a minute or so until you can feel it adhering. Next, we'll put our glue onto the entire front page and overlap onto the front of the spine paper. This will overlap onto the spine paper about 1/2 inch. Now, glue that page onto one of your boards. Press firmly, make sure it adheres on every single part of it before you go to the next step. This is what it should look like from the inside. When viewed from the outside front, this is what it looks like currently. Now, glue up your back page to your second board exactly the same way as you did the front first board. This is what it should look like now when viewed from the inside. Now, place everything under a heavy weight, at least for a couple of hours. Overnight wouldn't hurt. This is what your signatures look like when viewed from the inside, now that everything is glued up and dry. We'll turn our attention to the first signature of the book. Note the measurements on the stub right there. There's a line 1/4 inch from the edge of the paper, and that's where the 3 holes are in that stub. Those will align with the 3 holes in your piece of vellum that you'll sew to this. Some of these holes you'll sew through more than one time, so make sure you've enlarged them enough to make it easy to pull your thread and your needle through. This is a mock-up of a vellum page. Note the measurements and how they will align with the holes in the stubs of your signatures. This is what things should look like before we begin doing the sewing. You should need no more than 15 inches of your waxed linen thread. Once again, you'll thread it through the needle and leave about 3 inches dangling as a tail at the end. Begin by pushing the needle from the back of the stub, the signature, out through the front of the piece of vellum in the center hole. Leave about 3 inches of thread dangling out that center back hole. Later, you're going to use this to tie off your sewing. Once you have pulled the needle and thread through the center front of the vellum page, then push the needle and thread through the top front of the vellum page into the back of the stub of the signature. This is what it will look like once you've pulled the needle and thread through that top hole in the back of the signature. Now, push the needle and thread through the bottom hole of the stub, pushing it through that, coming out the front of the vellum page. This is what it should look like when viewed from the front of a vellum page. The needle and thread is coming through the bottom hole out the front. Now we're going to take the needle and thread and push it through the front of the vellum page out through the back of the stub of the signature in the center hole. You now have the needle and thread coming through the back center hole of the stub, the signature, as well as the 3-inch tail you originally left dangling there to begin with. We'll begin the process of tying it off. In the sewing process, you had sewn from the top hole to the bottom hole on the back of that signature stub. Right now, the thread and your needle should be on one side of that thread, and the tail of your thread should be on the other. This will now allow you to tie a snug knot atop that thread going down the center of the binding. Then go ahead and tie a second knot. After you've trimmed off the excess thread, this is what the binding should look for the first signature at the back of that stub and that vellum page. This is what it should look like when viewed from the front. Now go ahead and sew the remainder of your vellum pages in the same way.